decided to perish that thought. You certainly would not be successful, because Qurans today are found from Fiji to Malaysia to Indonesia to Bangladesh and India and Pakistan and Iraq and Syria. And do I need to continue to name the places? Kansas City and Lawrence and Chicago and New York City and Los Angeles and Buenos Aires and Caracas, and on and on and on. So imagine that 2 of you or 10 of you or 100 of you decided to get together and alter what the Quran says. You would be discovered very, very quickly. Because there is no way that you somehow could gather up all of the Qurans in the world. If you did, people would say, what are those people in Lawrence doing with all of the Qurans in the world? But you see, in effect, what you are having to say is that what you would not entertain the thought of doing, Christians did, to a book that they love as much as you love the Quran. And that what you could not do because of the impossibility of it, somehow they did. For very early, the Christian message in written form was scattered among multitudes of peoples and languages and countries, many of whom did not like each other and did not trust each other. Many of whom had different theological perspectives. And you know what a problem that is. You know what happens in a religion class at Kansas University, if they offer such here, in Islam, when you have Shiite students and Sunni students? I know what happens. You know what happens. They're constantly watching each other in terms of how they might relate to whatever the professor says, because they disagree about certain things. Now you may say, well, they all agree about the Quran and the 5 pillars. That's beside the point. The point is there is a degree at some level of suspicion and distrust. And so there was among those early Christian groups, I am ashamed to say. And so there still is today among Christian groups. I would be a fool not to admit that. But the point is, given that kind of a context, given the fact that all Christians who truly know something of God love God's Word, the Holy Book, the Bible, who would dare change it? Who would think to change it? And how would they bring it to pass? And so you see, given the fact that the New Testament affirms the crucifixion and the death and the resurrection of Jesus, Mr. Deedat is forced simply to deal with a variety of things that, and he could extend his list on out. He has many more arguments than these that he could offer, but he's forced to deal with a variety of things that are not that weighty. For example, he wants to talk about a spiritualized body and says, who said so? Paul? Poor exegesis, Mr. Deedat. To equate spiritual with spirit or spiritualized is not to respect the context of the New Testament and the possibility of a variety of meanings for the word. For example, in Galatians 6:1, the Apostle Paul says, and let those of you who are spiritual restore such a one. Is he saying, let those of you who have spiritualized bodies? No. But Mr. Deedat would have you understand that the word spiritual in 1 Corinthians 15 always must mean one and the same thing, namely spirit or spiritized. That's just bad exegesis. That's not respecting the context of the New Testament and the variation in the possibility of the uses of words. He tells us, for example, that when Jesus was betrayed, everyone fled, and so we have no eyewitnesses to his crucifixion. How do you know that? That is an assumption. The New Testament does not say, having fled, they stayed away. You have to assume that, and that is an assumption you make because it is one that somehow supports the position that you want to take. He wants to say about Jesus and Jonah. Was Jonah alive in the belly of the whale? Yes. And so was Jesus alive? He wants to talk about threes and so on. I'll tell you the answer to the sign, Mr. Deedat. It is that Jonah was entombed. It happened to be in a fish. And Jesus was entombed. It happened to be in the earth. The issue is not three. The issue is not dead or alive. The issue is entombment. I'm surprised to hear you admit, I think you admitted, that Jesus was in the tomb alive for 3 days. That's not standard Muslim doctrine. Standard Muslim doctrine is that Jesus' similitude or image somehow was imparted to someone standing nearby, and Jesus got away scot-free, and someone else was on the cross. Well, that is a Muslim interpretation, is it not, my friend? If you would look among your scholars, if you would look at the range of opinions and interpretations in Islamic theology, this is at least one perspective. Now, what's not being said to many of you people tonight, you Americans, is this: that Islam has a great divergency of perspectives on a variety of issues. But you're not going to hear that tonight. You're not going to learn that. What is said to you tonight by one man is in effect reported as that which all Muslims believe about a certain thing. And we could pick 100 subjects tonight and discover considerable diversity. Jesus was in the tomb 3 days alive. I'm astonished. What does 3 days equal, he asks. Well, I would suggest to you, what does 5 minutes equal? In Beirut, you'd better not take 5 minutes to mean 5 minutes on the clock, 60 seconds. Because it doesn't. Can you repair my shoes? Yes. When will they be ready? 5 minutes. It means a little while. It's very imprecise. You want to ask me, Dr. Douglas, how much time did you spend in Lawrence, Kansas? 2 days. When did you arrive? 2 o'clock Thursday. When did you leave? 9 o'clock Friday. That hardly sounds like 48 hours. But it is 2 days. For that is the way we use language, and that is the way the writers of the New Testament use language. And so you see, it's to trivialize the thing, to come along and in effect begin to clip down days and ask, what's really going on here? You have to respect the context, the setting, the way people in their own cultures deal with issues and subjects and so on and so forth. All right, having said all of that, let me go on to say what I want to say. Namely, that the Holy Book points almost from its beginning to the crucifixion, to the death, and to the resurrection of Jesus. I cannot develop these in detail for you, and so I run the risk of appearing foolish in the process, but I invite you to look at them nonetheless.